We have a long history of developing plugins and solutions for FileMaker, including ScriptMaster, Scribe, and SuperContain. DocuBin, our document management solution, won Solution of the Year at last year's developer conference, and will be presenting MirrorSync this year. Jesse has been active in the FileMaker community for over 15 years, is certified in FileMaker 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and hopefully 12 soon. He leads the Atlanta FileMaker user group and is the winner of the 2009 FileMaker Excellence Award for Outstanding Contribution to the FileMaker community. Time permitting, we'll be addressing questions after the presentation, but feel free to use the chat box or contact us anytime by emailing plugins@360works.com. I'll now hand over the program to Jesse.
All right, thanks, Sarah. What I'm going to be showing today is 360Works MirrorSync. This is something that we started working on at the developer conference last year. We kind of had a rough prototype working around January of this year, and then we commercially launched it, made it available for the last week of May of this year. So it's a fairly new product. And what it's designed to do is it's designed to take a single user database that's running either on FileMaker Pro, so that could be running on your laptop or your desktop computer. It could also be running in FileMaker Go, either on your iPad or your iPhone. And then it takes the information in that single user database and does a bidirectional synchronization with FileMaker Server so that you always have a full copy of your data on both places, or many places if you have many users connecting with laptops or iPads or iPhones. And so MirrorSync is a server application. You install it on your FileMaker server. Technically speaking, you install it on your FileMaker web publishing engine. And the setup process for it, we worked very, very hard on making it as easy as possible as we could to set it up. I mentioned that we had it kind of working in a rough form in January. Pretty much from like January until May, we've been working on really just increasing the usability and making the setup process as quick and easy as we can, because we know that as you are a FileMaker developer and you're always constrained for time and how quickly and how long will this take you. So we wanted to make it so that MirrorSync was as quick and easy as possible to set up, and you'll see that when I get to the demo view. MirrorSync is designed to sync your entire database. It's not just for like a single piece of data or a single operation. It will sync your entire database, all of the related things. So you can have a very complex system. I'm going to be demoing a fairly complex system with 25 related tables. And it will sync all of that back and forth between your FileMaker device and the FileMaker server. It will also sync your foreign key fields. I'll talk a little bit more detail about primary and foreign keys as I get further into the presentation, and that'll make more sense when I get to that point. A very important point and a common misconception is that there are no plugins with MirrorSync. There's nothing that has to be installed on your users' computers. There's nothing special to install on their iPads or iPhones. It's all native FileMaker scripting talking to the MirrorSync application, which runs on the FileMaker server. So there is software to install, but it's only installed on your server. The files that you give to people to work offline are just regular plain FileMaker files. You could just email it to somebody and they could immediately start working with it with nothing to install. So with that said, I'm going to jump into demo mode in just a minute. And when I do, I'm going to be demonstrating 3 principles of MirrorSync. The first thing I want to show is that MirrorSync is excellent at solving problems with WAN performance. If you have a database that your client is happy with, but maybe they're not happy with the speed of accessing it across the network, whether that's the local network or a wide area network, MirrorSync can be instrumental in solving that problem. So I'm going to demonstrate that. After that, I'm going to show you what the MirrorSync setup process looks like so that you can get an idea of, if you were to take this on yourself and add MirrorSync to your solution, how much work would be involved. And then the last thing I'll show you is MirrorSync running on an iPad in offline mode and syncing between that iPad and FileMaker server. So I'm going to get into the demo now. Before I do, I just want to point out that on the right side of your screen, you should have a place to type in questions. You can put questions in there. After the demo, we'll come back and we'll get to as many questions as we can at the end. And if we don't get to your questions, send us an email to plugins@360works.com. we always respond to that. We have 2 dedicated tech support people that just respond to those emails. So you should be able to expect a fairly quick response to any email that you send us. So I'm going to hide my slides. I'm going to jump right into demo. So I've got a server next to me called Applethought. And before I open this file, I want to tell you what I've done in Applethought. I've intentionally set up a network throttling program that will limit the bandwidth on the computer. And so I've limited it to a 1.5 megabit bandwidth with 120 millisecond ping time. So that is, I don't mean to go into like too specific network details, but that is fairly representative of what a user working at home over a DSL connection would typically get. Some users are going to be faster than that. They might be on a cable modem instead of a DSL. Other users are going to be slower than that because they're going to be tethering over 3G or using the 3G built into their iPhone or iPad. But this is kind of a fairly typical middle ground range for working from a hotel, working from home, working from a coffee shop, those kinds of places, especially if you're in a shared internet environment. So that's what my specs are as far as the server speed is 1.5 megabits per second and 120 millisecond ping. And I'm going to open this file as a guest, a FileMaker Server. And what I'm really trying to show, what I want you to pay attention to as I'm demoing this, is the speed of the operations. So I'm going to click Open here. There's no password on this file. It is opening. You guys probably can't see when my cursor changes to a beach ball. But I have a beach ball cursor right now. Okay, and that just opened. For this demo, I'm using FM Starting Point. This is a free template that's given away by Richard Carlton Consulting. I contacted Richard, and he was very thoughtful of him to allow me to use his solution for this demo. And I should also point out that this is really kind of a best-case scenario as far as wide area network speed because Starting Point is well designed. It avoids some pitfalls and gotchas that affect other solutions that might perform poorly on the wide area network. So what I'm going to be showing you is actually kind of fairly efficient compared to a lot of solutions that we've seen come in from clients and some other developers. So I'm going to jump in my contacts list. I just clicked contacts. It's taking me a second. Okay, it's loading. It's loading. Okay, and here comes my contacts view. And I can flip through these. You may be able to hear me clicking over the microphone. I'm not sure, but the screen is moving much, much slower than my clicks are going. If I click into a record and make let me create a new record here. So I'm going to create a new record. So I click that. So typing is fairly fast because there's no type ahead in here. So this is all local operations. So this is all fairly quick. Now you'll see when I click off of the record, I'm clicking now, and it takes it a minute, and I get the beach ball, and now it's done. So there's a 2 or 3 second delay on that. If I want to select my company that I'm associated with, I can click that magnifying glass. That pops this open. I can type in a company name, and I click one more time to select it, and now it's done. And if I change a little bit of information there, and I switch to a different record, you'll see a little bit of a perceptible lag, and then I'll switch to the next record. So this is not unusable at all. This is a little slow, but I think it's within the acceptable range that most users would be expecting when they're working remotely across the internet. If I go into list view, you can see these are all the members of the FileMaker Academy group. And list view in here is fairly quick because it's already loaded all these records into memory because it's sorted when I initially came in here. So you kind of learn a lot as you work, like I have it set up here with this slow delay on it. You start to learn a lot about what makes FileMaker run slow and quick. It's kind of an interesting exercise that you can do on your own. When I jump over to invoices, things start to get a little slower. A lot slower. And I'm going to start flipping through invoices. And so that just came up. I'm clicking, and now I get next invoice. Clicking, next invoice. This is definitely slower, but I would still put it in the usable range. When I go into list view, now it starts to get to the point where users start getting very unhappy. So I clicked list view a little while ago. I'm still waiting. I've just now gotten my list view. Every time I scroll, there's a long delay, and I'm waiting for that to draw. Still waiting. Okay, now I've got my list view. So this is the speed that we can expect the solution to operate at over a DSL connection with 120 millisecond ping time. So let's move that over to the side. I'm going to jump back to the contacts list view because I'm going to use that in a minute. And I'm going to open a different file that I have here minimized in my dock. This one just feels much snappier. So I'm moving around. I can click all of my sections of the application. They load instantly. When I go to contacts, list view, it's instant. I'm going to create a new contact. I'll put in my brother Sam. And so there's no delay at all as I'm clicking into and out of these fields. Let's go ahead and select a company. This was a little bit slow before. Do a lookup to find that. Click again to link it. There's no delay there. When I go into invoices, that's instant. I can click these invoices as fast as I want. I can go to list view. There's no delay there either. No delay as I scroll. So this is working instantly. And the reason, if you're paying any attention, is fairly obvious because as you can see in the title, this is FM starting point 3 offline. So my file that I'm working with here is a local copy. I'm not going across this slow network connection to get this data. So you're like, okay, well that's sort of cheating. That's not really a fair comparison, which is true. But where this gets interesting is I've made a change in this database now. On my online file, I have Jesse Barnum. In my offline file, I've added Sam Barnum. So if I was just working on this offline file, I would need to figure out, first of all, which records had changed. If I want to merge these changes, I need to figure out which have changed. Not only do I need to figure out which contacts have changed, I would need to figure out which accounts have changed, which estimates have changed, which invoices and projects have changed, which ones are new versus which ones are changed. What if somebody else created the same record over here? What about deletions? What if I delete one of these records? You know, how would I know which records have been deleted? So it's a thorny problem to solve to try to merge these two systems together. And that's where MirrorSync comes in. I'm going to run a script here, which I've added called MirrorSync. And this is a native FileMaker script. This is not using a plugin. And this is sending data to our MirrorSync server, which is running on the same computer as the other one. And so, as the online file. And I should point out that it has the same delay. So when it just did that sync script, it was operating over that same DSL 1.5 megabit, 120 millisecond ping time, fairly slow connection. And you can see that sync happen very quickly. And now I've got both records in both places. Here's Sam, here's Jesse. Over here, here's Jesse, here's Sam. If I make a change to either one of these, I can put in my email here. If I look at Jesse's record over here in my online file, which is still kind of slow, I don't have my email there. I'm going to run my MirrorSync script again. And this is, I glossed over this a little bit before, but this is showing me what has been done to the system. And so FileMaker Server, this is telling me these changes were written to the server as opposed to changes to my local file. I can see that one record was modified in the contacts database. That's because I just changed the email address. And I can see that 10 records were added to this contacts log archive. There's an audit log that happens behind the scenes here whenever I'm making changes. So you probably didn't even know that those records needed to be synced as well, but MirrorSync is able to see all of the records in the entire system that have changed, and it takes care of moving them all over. So I'm going to click OK here. There's my email address there. And deletions are another thing. It is quite difficult to keep track of. If you delete a record, it's hard to find that because how do you search for a record that doesn't exist? MirrorSync takes care of that by keeping track of how many records you previously had in your database, knowing how many records it should expect, and when it runs the sync, if it finds that there's less records than it expected, then it will scan the list of primary keys in the remaining records and find which one is missing, and it will delete that same one on the other side. So let's do that. I'm going to delete this record here, not all records. So Jesse is gone from that view. If I come over to my server view and I go into list view, Jesse's still there, and I run my MirrorSync script. And it shows me that in FileMaker Server sync context, one record was deleted, and there was one record added to my audit log. And when I look over there, that record is gone. So here to summarize is that we're seeing that we have the ability to work with this very fast local file for a home user, a user in a hotel, a user doing a presentation at a place where they might not have working internet access. For whatever reason, either they don't have internet access or their internet access is too slow for them to work efficiently in the database. MirrorSync is a turnkey solution to that problem because it allows them to make all of their changes on a local file, and then whenever they have working or fast internet access, they can run the script. And even if they're just working at home, they may be online the entire time. It's just more efficient for them to work on their own local copy of the file and then sync their changes as needed. So that's the first point. Remember I mentioned the 3 points of my demo. That was the first point I wanted to show you, is the WAN performance problem and how MirrorSync can solve that problem. What I want to show you next is the setup process. So you may be looking at this and you may be thinking, okay, Jess, that is very cool. I admit that's cool. But I'll bet it was a lot of work to go in and set up all the scripts and do whatever you needed to do to make all that happen. Because these are native FileMaker scripts that are running. And actually, if I show you the script for a second, it's quite long. So it goes on for a long time, so you're like, okay, somebody had to write that script. So that's what I'm going to get to next. So let me go ahead and close this down for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload a file to my, I'm going to run the server admin software. Oops. So I'm going to, oh, you know what? At this point, I'm going to turn off that speed limiting factor, because at this point we've talked about wide area network performance. We've already shown that problem. So you didn't see me do it, but I just went to the computer next to me and I turned off that 1.5 megabit slowdown. So we're now working on a Wi-Fi network locally with the service. So it should be normal local network speed. So here are my databases that I have hosted. I have this tasks database and the FM starting point. I just showed you the FM starting point database. Now I'm going to work with this tasks database. The tasks database is, and I just wanted to show that to you, so I'm going to go and hide this again. Switching back to FileMaker Pro, I'm going to open that tasks database from ApplePlot. And if you've looked at the templates that come with FileMaker 12, this should be very familiar because this is actually the same database that you get when you say new from starter solutions and you go down to tasks right there. That is this database that I'm working with here. So I have this database open. I've made a couple changes that I want to talk about because these are important. One, just for demo purposes, I've added these 3 test records. The more important changes that I wanted to show you are in the tables. There are 3 tables in the solution: tasks, assignees, and attachments. For MirrorSync to work, every table in your solution must have 2 fields. It must have a primary key, which uniquely identifies it. And a primary key is probably familiar to a lot of people in the call, but if you're not familiar with what a primary key is, it's also sometimes called a unique ID, it's sometimes called a serial number, sometimes called a match field. It basically is just some number or some value. It could be numeric, it could be text, but it must be present in every record. It must be different for every record, and it cannot be blank. And it's just a way for the database to uniquely identify every record in the system. So every table in your system must have a primary key in order to work with MirrorSync. Odds are good that if your database is designed by a database designer, every table already has a primary key. The other thing that every database, every table needs for MirrorSync is it needs a modification timestamp. That's a field. I added this modification timestamp because this table did not have one. I just named it modification timestamp, and I just checked this box here that says auto enter a modification timestamp. Then I copied that field and I pasted it into the assignees table and in the attachments table right there. The other thing that I did, in case you wanted to do the same stuff, I want to make sure I show you every step that I did, is while my tasks table has a primary key in this template, this task ID match field, has an auto-entered serial primary key. The other two tables, assignees and attachments, did not. So I added this ID field to assignees, and I added this ID field to attachments. So those are the changes that I made to the tables. And I think you'll agree that those are pretty minimal changes. And in many cases, you'll already have those two tables. Many databases that we work with, that we get from clients, already have primary keys and modification timestamps. So there are no MirrorSync specific fields that need to be added to your tables. I've also created 3 new layouts: sync tasks, sync attachments, and sync assignees. They don't have to be named this way. I just chose to name them this way, so it'll be clear to me that I'm using these for synchronization. They can be named anything. And they're very simple layouts. All they have on them is just black and white text. This is the default layout that you get from FileMaker. And they contain the fields on them that I want to sync. I've removed some of the fields. You can see from the labels that I added all fields and removed some. I've removed my fields that I don't want to sync, which are basically my unstored fields, my global fields, and my summary fields. So all I'm left with is the fields that I actually want to synchronize. So those are the only changes that I've made to this file from the template that we get when we start up, when we create a new starter solution to FileMaker. So with that in mind, let's look at the process for adding two-way synchronization to this database. So I'm going to switch to my web browser. Oops, not. Type, Jesse, type. Okay. And I mentioned earlier in my slides that MirrorSync is an application that you install on your FileMaker web server. So I've installed that on my Apple file server. And so it's a web application. It has a home page. And there's not much on the home page except for this big button to launch the MirrorSync application. So that's what I just clicked. It's coming up now. And that's where that gives me a graphic user interface that I can use to configure all of my synchronization settings. I'm going to go kind of quickly on these screens. Sarah, who introduced me at the beginning, has done a very nice 10-minute detailed video explaining screen by screen all the information you need to have. I'm not going to go in that level of detail just for time purposes. But if you were doing this yourself, I highly recommend that you read all of these instructions as you go and check all these tooltips with a question mark so that you can see more information about the items it's asking for. So with that in mind, let's get started. So I'm going to put in a username and password that I set when I installed MirrorSync. And here is the FM starting point database that I was just demonstrating for you before. This is what I was using to synchronize that solution. I'm going to add a new solution here. And it's going to start with a questionnaire. So it needs to know just a few basic things about how I want the synchronization to work. MirrorSync supports bidirectional synchronization where changes are read from the server to my laptop or iOS device, as well as going from my iOS device up to my server. It can also support one-way sync, which is the same thing but just only in one direction, either from the server to my FileMaker client program or just from my FileMaker client program to the server. I'm going to select bidirectional sync in this case. Then we have primary key assignment strategy. We can pick sequential or UUID. Sequential is what you're probably most used to in FileMaker Pro. It's just when you have a field in FileMaker, typically a number field, and you make it a serial number, so it starts at 1 and just goes up for all of your ID numbers. That's what you're going to typically use. UUID is a different approach that UUID stands for Universally Unique Identifier, and essentially it's a very long, carefully randomized number that is very carefully calculated by standard algorithms to be astronomically unlikely to ever create a duplicate record. These are very significant from a synchronization standpoint because one of the issues faced during synchronization is ID conflicts. If my next record on my laptop is ID number 10, and so I create a new record for myself, which is number 10, but on the server, or the next record in my contact database would be ID number 20. When I sync record number 10, let's just say that's the Jesse contact, up to the server, we're faced with two choices. We can either write it with the same ID, which is 10, or we can allow it to get a new primary key, which is 20. if we sync it with an ID of 10, the problem is that if the server is already on ID 20, that means it's probably already created records 1 through 20 or 1 through 19. And so there probably already is a record number 10. And so if I were to sync this to the server with record number 10, we would have 2 record number 10s, which would cause all sorts of problems. So what MirrorSync does to solve this problem is it allows the record to be renumbered as number 20. So now the Jesse contact record on my laptop is number 10, but it's number 20 on the server, and MirrorSync will keep track of that. So it knows that whenever it's record number 20 on the server. And to just go a little further down that rabbit hole, it starts to get tricky when you run into foreign keys. Because let's say that Jesse has some related phone numbers attached to them. All of those related phone numbers have a contact ID in them with the number 10. When they get written up to the server, if they just still contain number 10, they're going to point to whatever number 10 is on the server, which is the wrong record. They need to be updated to show record number 20 so that they're pointing to the correct record on the server. If you set this to sequential, then MirrorSync will take care of all of that for you. It'll allow those records to be duplicated to the other side. It'll make sure that records don't get, that you don't get overlapping IDs. It'll rewrite all of your foreign keys in both directions as it reads and writes, and you just don't have to think about it. And it's really nice because you can just keep the serial number schemes that you're already using in your current FileMaker databases. If you're creating a new database from scratch in FileMaker 12, there's a nice new feature added in FileMaker 12 called Get UUID. And what it does is it creates a new, very long number in your table that is guaranteed to not be the same as anything else on any database system in the universe. It's kind of a broad claim, but that's mathematically true. And so the nice thing about UUIDs is that when you copy a record with a UUID from your laptop to the server, you don't have to remember it because you're guaranteed that there are no other records on the server with that same UUID. So you can see here that this is an important selection because it changes how MirrorSync is going to treat the ID numbers when it writes it up to the server. So the last point here is just a little bit of a warning. If you have set up your synchronization incorrectly, it's possible that you could get duplicate records. It's possible that records could get deleted. And so we highly recommend that you back up all of your databases before proceeding beyond this point. So I do have a backup of this database, in fact, so I will say I am all backed up. We had a little bit of fun with the wording here, but it'll still allow you to pick this and go, but we just want to make you feel a little guilty. So now what MirrorSync needs to know is which database is it that you want to back up, or not back up, that you want to synchronize. So, and what's the username and password for that database? So my username, I'm just using the admin no password account that gets created when you create the template file. So admin no password. We do support SSL encryption, but I don't have an SSL certificate installed on my server, so I'm not going to check that. We're going to choose which database. It's the tasks database that we want to sync. And now it's going to start, now it's going to ask me to create layouts. And remember I showed you these 3 layouts here: sync tasks, sync attachments, and sync assignees. I've already done this step. So that's what this is telling you to do. And what it's warning you about is it's a good idea to get rid of fields that have a yellow magnifying glass in them or no magnifying glass, because those are typically either unstored calculations, related fields, global fields, summary fields, or container fields. Container fields we do sync. So if you have container fields that you want to sync, you should leave them on the record. But everything else that's not a green magnifying glass, get rid of because it's not going to sync anyway, so all it's going to do is slow things down. I've already done that, so I'm going to click Next. Now it's reading my list of databases, my list of tables, and oh, there's nothing to do here. Let me jump back to. So it's reading my list of tables. So these are, I'm sorry, of layouts. These are all of my layouts in the system. Each layout obviously corresponds to a particular table occurrence, which corresponds to a certain table. So I'm going to pick these 3 layouts that go with these 3 tables that I want to sync. I select them, and I move them over to my list of synchronized layouts. Now, remember that I mentioned that every table in MirrorSync needs to have a primary key and a modification timestamp? This is where we need to tell MirrorSync which field is our primary key and which field is our modification timestamp. There is an optional second primary key that's somewhat rare, that only comes into play if you have join tables in your solution that don't contain a primary key, but instead contain 2 foreign keys. So in that case, you would pick your foreign key here and your foreign key there. That's outside the scope of what I need here for my task database, so I'm not going to use my primary key too. So I'm going to pick my primary keys from my assignees, from my attachments, and from my tasks. And then I'm going to tell it which field is my modification timestamp field in those three tables. So MirrorSync now knows all of the key required fields that it needs in these tables. Now we need to tell it about our foreign keys. And it should be apparent why it needs to know about foreign keys. Recall when we talked about the issue of serial numbers versus UUIDs, that MirrorSync is going to renumber all of the foreign keys to correspond with the primary keys. And so it needs to know which keys are the foreign keys. So I'm going to tell it right now. So in my assignees table, I have a foreign key, which is the task ID, and that relates to the primary key in the tasks table. And the same thing for attachments. Attachments also has a task ID field that relates to the primary key into tasks. And the task table does not have any primary keys, so there's nothing that I need to do there. Then we built this little kind of just interactive confirmation screen. And obviously we've tried to make it look like the FileMaker relationship graph, so it's going to be familiar. And it's just a way of making sure that you made the right choices in the previous screen. And I can see if this is correct. Tasks is a two-minute relationship to both assignees and attachments. So there's nothing for me to do here except for confirm that it's correct. Now MirrorSync has read all of the names of the fields from those layouts, and it's presenting to me to see if I want to sync all of these. I don't need to sync fields. If there were certain fields that were not important from my sync, like let's say that for my tasks, I didn't really care about the category. I could uncheck category here, and it would not include that as one of the fields that it's going to sync. I'm going to go ahead and include all the fields from all the tables for this demo. Changes have been saved. So now at this point, MirrorSync knows everything that it needs to know in order to do the synchronization. It knows whether it's bidirectional or it knows it's bidirectional. It knows that we're using serial numbers. It knows what my layouts are. It knows what my primary key and my modification timestamp are. It knows all my foreign keys. It knows which fields I want to sync from which table. So that's all of the information we need in order to do the sync. So at this point, this is where I'm actually going to start modifying my database. But as you're going to see here, the modification is pretty easy. It's just 4 copy and paste steps. So I'm going to copy my MirrorSync table. So that's just a standard part of the installation process. We have our own table that we create called MirrorSync. And I'm going to move this aside a little bit. Let me reverse where these are. And a neat little thing that we did to make this easier for you. Watch what happens when I paste this table in. You should see a little check mark appear here. There we go. So MirrorSync is constantly checking this file to see if we've done these steps, and we just have to pretty much go down the line and do each step, and it checks it off as we go. The next thing it's going to do is it has 2 scripts that it needs me to copy. There's a MirrorSync and a MirrorSync setup. Paste them into your database file. So I'm going to click copy here. Scripts have been copied. I go into ScriptMaker, and I will paste those scripts. Done. And there's my check mark. The next thing for me to do is copy the MirrorSync layout. There's already an existing MirrorSync layout that got created when I pasted the table, but I need to delete everything on it and then paste these layout elements. So I'm going to copy this. It's telling me that they've been copied. Now I'm going to go into my MirrorSync layout. I'm going to go to layout mode. I'm going to select all and delete. I'll delete my header, and then I'll paste. And then to just make this look a little nicer, I will shrink the borders. I'll delete that footer. Okay, so now save layout, exit layout. I get my check mark. So now we're almost done. This is the fun part, copying script steps. So I copy the script step, and remember that very long script I showed you before? It just created that dynamically for me. And you'll see what I mean. When I go to my MirrorSync script, it's empty right now. When I paste, it's written this entire script for me. And let me just point out, this is, if I do say so myself, this is really cool because this is not a boilerplate script. This is actually dynamically generated, and it has all of your tables and all of your fields and all of their field names in it. So if I go down to, let's go down to where we're creating records. Okay, so here we go. So this is where we are writing changes to the tables, and I can see that here is where it's assigning stuff to assignees. It's assigning the task ID, the email, the name, the phone, and there are sections in each one of these for each table and each type of operation that I'm doing. So here's the same thing for deletions, and then here's the same thing for if I'm deleting tasks, I go to the sync task table. So this entire script is dynamically generated and customized to your solution. So there are no scripts that you need to write. There's not even any scripts that you need to modify. And I've pasted that, and I get my green check mark, and then I'm now done. So that was the setup process for MirrorSync. All that's left for me to do at this point is to take copies of my file from the server and send them to the users who need to do the syncs. So I think you'll hopefully agree with me that is not a hard process. It's not as instant as just like checking a box, but it's definitely something that you'll be able to do for your solutions. So I'm finished there. And what I want to do now is I want to get a copy of this tasks database, and I want to send it to my FileMaker device. And I want to show it on the iPad here. So what I'm going to do is, what I could do at this point is I could go into FileMaker Server admin, I could close the database, I could download a copy of it, and I could open the database. To be honest, during development, we just got really sick and tired of doing that step all the time because we've tested this a lot of times. So we added a download database button that just does the same thing for you. So when I click the download database button, it gives me a little, it gives me two pieces of important information. The first thing it's telling me is this will download a copy of the database that you can use to work offline. You must be sure to run the MirrorSync script in the FileMaker file before you make any changes. After that, you can make changes and run the MirrorSync script again when you want to sync. I don't typically just read the text verbatim here, but this is important. When you first get your offline file, or when your users first get the offline file, they need to be sure to run the MirrorSync script first before they start making any changes. The reason for that is because when they run that script for the first time, it's going to set everything equal to whatever it sees on the server. And so if they've added new records and then they run the sync script, those records aren't on the server, so it's going to wipe them out to make your offline file match what's on the server. So be sure to have your users run that sync script first, then any changes that they make on their device will be synced to the server. The second note this is telling you is that once you've run the sync on a particular device, whether it's a laptop or an iPad or an iPhone, you can't copy that file to another device and continue to use it, or at least not continue to sync it. You need to make sure that you get a fresh copy of the file from the server and then distribute that fresh copy without syncing it to all the devices that are going to be using it. So I'm going to hit OK here. This is now prompting me for my FileMaker Server admin console, the same username and password that I would use when I'm running the regular FileMaker Server admin console. So put that in. Now it needs to know whether this is a multi-file solution or single file solution. If it's a single file solution, it's downloading it. Now it's ready to save it. Just needs to know where. I could leave it named tasks, but to make it more clear, I'm going to name it tasks offline so I don't get it mixed up with my server file. So here's my file. And I can see that it has my changes in it because there's my MirrorSync script. But I'm not going to run that script right now because that would link this file to the device that I'm on, which is my laptop. And what I really want to do is I want to show this to you running on my iPad. So I'm going to email this file to myself. And while that's happening, I am going to flip over to my iPad screen. I'm hoping that everybody can see my iPad screen at the moment. Let's check and see if I've got email. There it is. There's the file I just sent myself. In case you didn't know, this is just a little handy tip that has nothing to do with MirrorSync. you can send yourself FileMaker files via email without needing to sync using like the iTunes cable or anything like that. So that's just a little tip in general. So far, this has nothing to do with MirrorSync. This is just mailing myself a file and opening up the database. So now I've got this file open. Great. Now, remember, the first thing I need to do before I make any changes is run my MirrorSync script. So I will do that right now. If I was doing this for a client, I would be sure to put a button on the layout somewhere. As it is, I'm just running it from that in my little gear menu in FileMaker Go. So this is my first synchronous device. So it asks me a question about what's the name of this device for description. So I leave that. Now it's just letting me know that once I've synced with this device, I can't transfer it to another computer. That's fine. Now I just need to log in with whatever my account is on this FileMaker database. I'm using the admin no password account that gets created by default, so I'm going to just leave this with no password. And now my initial sync is running. And so all it's doing at this point is just making sure that what I have on my laptop, or rather my iPad, matches what I have on my server. And it does, so it's saying there's no changes. That's great. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get on a plane and work on this database. So I'm going to go into my system settings, airplane mode, FileMaker Go, warning me that I'm in airplane mode. And I'm just doing that to really, really make it very clear to you, to prove to you that I am not working on FileMaker Server on this iPad. I'm going to open this file. I guess I've still got it open here. Let me hide other stuff so it's not in the way. Oops, I don't want to hide everything. So I've got my iPad working offline over in this window. I've got my task database, which I'm open as a guest of the server, open in this other window. So let's go ahead. First, let's say that somebody's working back at the office on the hosted file, and they create a new task. And then it's something boring like task from server. So now we've got another record over there. And I don't need this to be sorted. I'll just put it in any order. And now I'm going to jump back to my iPad, and I've got my 3 tasks here. Let's create a new task, which is get bike gears fixed. I ride my bike to the office, and the gears don't really work that well, so I need to, oh, it's already personal. Gears don't happen to work that well, so I'm going to take it to the shop. I actually have it sitting right next to me here. And I took a picture of it with my iPad camera. So there's the bike in question. Let's go back to my list. And so this presentation is almost finished. So I'm going to mark this as complete. And so we're ready to go. So let's go ahead and run our sync. Okay, that failed. And this is kind of a little bit of a trick question. I'm just trying to see who's awake. Why didn't that work? I can't hear you, but I'm guessing that a lot of you said it's because you're in airplane mode. That's right. So you can see what I wanted to demonstrate there is that we get nice error reporting. So if we're not able to sync, MirrorSync gives us a user-friendly message saying you're not able to sync right now. So let me jump back into system settings. I'm going to turn airplane mode back off. We've landed now. I have working Wi-Fi. Now I'm ready to sync. So I am going to perform my sync script again. Getting a little bit farther this time. And it's doing a two-way sync, so it's copying all of the information in both directions. And so I can see now that on my iPad, my user group presentation still says completed. I've got the task from server. That came over from the server to the iPad. And when I jump back to my database in the server, my user group presentation is complete. My byte gears fixed is here. And if I look here in my attachments section, there's the photo that I uploaded from the camera built into my iPad. So we just demonstrated a lot of things. So to recap, what I showed you is I showed you the setup process in MirrorSync. I showed you that you don't need to write any scripts. In many cases, you don't even need to add any fields to your tables. I showed that you are able to create containers and that these containers will sync. And again, this is a bidirectional sync. I could add the container field on my desktop and have it sync to my iPad or vice versa. We showed that it works great in completely offline mode in airplane mode. And we've shown that this whole bidirectional relational sync, remember this attachment, this is not even in the task database, that's a related record. So I didn't have to write any logic telling MirrorSync what my, I didn't have to write any scripts to detect which changes were made in which tables. MirrorSync took care of detecting all of that for me. And so this is why I call MirrorSync a turnkey synchronization system, because it's really doing all of that work for you. So that's my demo. I'm going to jump back to my slides here. So at this point, we're getting towards the end of the presentation, so this is a good time. If you haven't entered in any questions yet, this is a good time to go ahead and put in your questions. We may not be able to get to all of them. I've been going a little slow. We've got 10 minutes left, so I'll try and speed up a little bit so we can get to questions. And again, if we don't get to your questions, send them to plugins@360works.com. And to kind of just recap use cases here, MirrorSync is great for these tasks here. It's great for solving WAN performance. I don't want to lose sight of that. A lot of people, when they think offline sync, they immediately think iPad, iPhone. But it's really great for just running on your laptop and being able to work on your FileMaker solution anywhere you are at full speed and be able to sync that back up without having to work over tethering or slow DSL connections or cable connections or anything like that. I didn't demonstrate one-way syncs to you, but I did want to mention it, that this is great for data collection on like an iOS device. If you have it going one way from the iOS device to the server, then you're not pulling down all the records that are changed on the server every time you sync. You're just pushing up the changes that you've collected on your iOS device. The flip side of that is that you can have a read-only database on your iOS device that pulls data from the server. So maybe this is great for, if you've got management or analysts or anything like that that need up-to-the-minute information, and they want to be able to pull that out quickly and access it anywhere, whether they're online or not, but they don't have any need to type on the keyboard on the iPad or the iPhone to key records back in. You can do one way the opposite direction. Seamlessly switch back and forth between working on your laptop or desktop versus working on your portable device and having all of that get synced two-way via the server. So quickly on availability and pricing, there's more information and a free demo version at 360works.com/MirrorSync. There is the only limitation on the free demo is that when you make an offline copy, like the one that I have on my iPad here, it only lasts for 24 hours. After 24 hours, I need to go back to the server and download a fresh copy from my portable devices. That's the only limitation on the demo. The pricing is $695. That includes up to 10 devices and up to 2 database solutions. A device is either a computer, an iPad, or an iPhone, not a person. So if you had one person that wanted to sync their iPad, iPhone, and computer, that would count as 3 devices. And a database solution is like FM Starting Point would be one database solution. This task database would be another solution. And you can purchase upgrades to have additional solutions. And then if you need more than 10 devices, it's $490 for an additional pack of 10 devices. MirrorSync also is included in our portfolio bundle. So a lot of people on this call probably already own the portfolio license, the 360Works portfolio license. If you do, then you already own MirrorSync. You've got that 10-pack, 2 database solution as part of your portfolio bundle. If you don't own the portfolio license currently, you can go to 360works.com/portfolio to learn more about it. It includes all of our products currently, and it includes upgrades and new products for the next 12 months. Sarah, you want to take over?
Sure. Thanks, everyone. To stay in contact with 360Works, again, you can contact us at plugins@360works.com. Feel free to email us any questions you have about MirrorSync. We also have a Twitter, Facebook, and RSS that we keep updated pretty frequently with news, announcements, product changes, etc. Our RSS gets updated most frequently, so if you want a ton of information, subscribe to our RSS. Next slide, please. FM Academy does not have a currently scheduled session, but we will be at the FileMaker Developer Conference in Miami next month, so stop by the booth at DevCon. You can also find this video and other FileMaker videos at FileMakerAcademy.com. For more information on FM Academy, FileMaker development, MirrorSync integration, you can contact one of your local FM Academy companies. They're listed here. So please visit one of the companies in your area. And I believe it is time for questions. We've got a couple minutes left, and we're not going to be able to get to everybody. But Jesse, could you talk a little bit about conflict resolution, and if you have two people trying to sync with various records, what happens?
Okay. So the way MirrorSync handles conflicts, and I'm going to give the short answer because we are short on time, but there's more that can be said about this. But the short answer is basically MirrorSync takes the latest change. So if I change this record at 3 o'clock and then Sarah changed it at 4 o'clock, it doesn't matter whether Sarah or I sync first or sync last. What will happen is Sarah's change will take precedence because her change happened at 4 o'clock. The exception to that is deletion. So if I changed it at 3 o'clock and Sarah deleted it at 4 o'clock, my change would take precedence over her deletion. So that's the automatic conflict resolution process for MirrorSync. It detects those for you. It does take care of this for you. One of the things that you can do that came up in a presentation that I did yesterday with MirrorSync is that remember that the MirrorSync script is just a regular FileMaker script. You can trigger it from your own scripts. You don't need to have a button that the user clicks. So one very powerful way that you can trigger MirrorSync is to tie it into the business logic of your application. So if the user is about to modify some critical piece of information, you can make it so that you can put a script trigger so that when they go to that screen, it does a sync right then. That way they know that they're working with the most current refreshed data. And you can make it so that as soon as they save their changes in the screen, it runs the sync again. So you, as the developer, have total control over whether you want to allow the user to schedule the scripts, whether you want those sync scripts to be tied into actions that occur during your database, or probably what's best is some combination of both of those. And by tying in the sync actions to actions that happen such as logging in, modifying certain key pieces of information or whatever, you can reduce that window of time between when they would be out of date with what's on the server and therefore reduce conflicts to start with. And if there is a conflict, MirrorSync will automatically detect that and resolve that by looking at who actually modified that record last.
Great, thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yes, we've got lots of questions. How does it work with container fields and enhanced container fields?
It works great with container fields and enhanced container fields. I don't have enough time to really get into the guts of how it works with the container fields. I will give you one caution point, which is that if you're using the enhanced external container fields, you cannot use that download button that I showed you. Let me see if I still have it open. This button right here, you would not want to use this button. You would want to use the download feature built into the server admin because that will actually take those external containers and merge them with the FileMaker database that you get. These buttons are doing the same thing, so you're not losing any functionality by going that way instead of this way. It's just a couple more clicks to switch to that window. But it will work fine with both types of container fields, and it does work correctly in both directions, both reading and writing.
Great. Another question that we're getting a lot of is, what if your database changes? You add or delete fields or relationships and tables?
Yeah, so we added a feature in MirrorSync 1.1 to do what I'm calling intelligent field matching. And what that means is that now MirrorSync it's not possible in FileMaker to actually propagate schema. What I mean by that is if I add a field on my server, there's no way that I know of to tell the clients to also add a field. However, the syncs will continue to work with whatever fields you had established at the time. So you can create new fields in the server. You can continue doing active development on the server. While you're doing that, all of your offline users will still be able to sync to the server using whatever fields they had at the time that you set that sync up for them. And then when you're completed with your development, you can create new offline files. You can send those to your users, and whenever it's convenient for them, they can switch. They can sync their old file, throw it away, and then get the new file that you sent them, and then do a sync to match up to what's on the server. So it works very nicely with kind of evolving solutions.
Great. I think we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. We're getting a lot of questions about, will this work on my runtime solution?
You know, that's a good question, and honestly, I don't know the answer. I have never tested it using FileMaker Runtime. My suspicion is that it would work. I can't think of any technical limitation that will prevent it from working, but you need to put a big asterisk on that, that I have not actually tested that. And I'm going to make a note about that right now to put that, and I will update the documentation. There's documentation online at the 360works.com/MirrorSync site. I'll have that updated by Monday. So whoever asked that question, if you'd like to go look at the documentation by Monday, I'll have an updated answer there. What else do we have, Sarah?
Let's see. People are asking, what happens if it's a really big database with lots of fields, lots of records?
So we have noticed performance differences between 11 and 12. 12 is clearly much, much faster than 11. The initial sync is probably where you'll find your slowest point. In my case, in my test, syncing a 20,000 record database takes about 40 or 50 seconds to do on the initial sync. I'm working with some users who are running FileMaker 11. It's taking a much longer time. We're working on trying to fix that. But on the syncs after the initial sync, it's only incremental. It doesn't make any difference how many records you have. If you have 100,000 records and you add 3, it's just going to sync those 3 records back and forth. So it really doesn't make any difference how many records there are after that initial sync is done. As for number of fields, it does scale linearly with the number of fields. So, you know, if you've got 200 fields, it's going to take twice as long to sync as 100 fields. That's not actually true. It's however much information is in those fields. If you have twice as much information per record, it'll take twice as long to sync those as one record, or as half the amount of information. But it's not contingent on how many. The only time that we care about how many records are in the database is actually for 2 cases, the initial sync and also for deletions. Because when a record is deleted, we need to examine the records in the database. So that also is a process that is dependent on how many records there are. But I think the best thing to do is to try the demo, download the demo, get it set up with your complex database, contact us for help if you need help, and see what that performance is like. I think you'll be quite happy with the speed of the sync, especially when you see the incremental syncs running.
Excellent. I believe we're out of time, so thank you very much for your time, Jesse. If anyone has any questions still, you can feel free to email us at plugins@360works.com again, or go on our website, 360works.com, to download the demo or see any more information.
Thanks a lot.
Anything else, Jesse?
I think we're set.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah.